name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. One night in Israel, something strange happened. A short video suddenly appeared online. Within hours, millions of people were watching it in shock. Because the video showed something no one expected. But the real question was, what actually happened that night? In today's video, we are going to uncover the mysterious story behind this surprising moment. Welcome to the Truth and Belief YouTube channel. The night in Tel Aviv began like any other ordinary evening. Cafes were full of quiet conversations. Waiters moved between tables carrying steaming cups of coffee, and the streets glowed under rows of yellow streetlights. Cars passed steadily along the wide roads, and security patrols slowly circled the busy areas as part of their routine. To anyone walking through the city, everything looked normal, peaceful, and predictable. In a small apartment overlooking the city lights, a young woman named Sarah sat quietly on her couch scrolling through social media on her phone. She had just finished a long day at the university and wanted nothing more than a moment of silence. The soft hum of traffic floated through the window behind her, while the screen of her phone lit up her tired face. Suddenly, a short video appeared on her screen. The clip showed a large hall filled with hundreds of people standing close together. The camera shook slightly as someone filmed the crowd from the back of the room. At the front stood an elderly man wearing a simple white turban, speaking into a microphone while the room remained completely silent. Sarah leaned closer to the screen, curious about what she was watching. The old man raised his hand gently and spoke with a calm but powerful voice. Slowly and clearly, he said words that many of the people in the room repeated after him. I bear witness that there is no God but God, and I bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the messenger of God. The crowd repeated the words together, their voices filling the hall with emotion and trembling energy. Some people cried openly while others embraced each other as if they had just discovered something life-changing. When the final words ended, the hall erupted with voices praising God, echoing loudly against the walls. Sarah blinked in disbelief and replayed the video again. The caption under the clip claimed that hundreds of Israeli Jews had just accepted Islam together in a single gathering. At first she assumed it was some kind of misinformation or an edited video designed to attract attention. But when she refreshed her feed, she saw another clip from a different angle. This one showed people standing outside the same building, hugging one another while tears rolled down their faces. A man near the camera whispered that they had been searching for truth for years and had finally found peace in Islam. Across the city, in a quiet government office, a security officer named David sat behind a desk covered with reports and glowing computer screens. His job required him to monitor unusual digital activity that might affect national stability. When an alert appeared on his system about viral videos spreading rapidly across social media, he opened the file with mild curiosity. The first video played automatically on his monitor. David watched silently as the elderly man recited the declaration of faith and the crowd repeated the words with deep conviction. His eyebrows slowly tightened as he realized how quickly the video was spreading across the internet. Within minutes, more clips appeared online from different locations across the country. Some showed small gatherings in homes, while others captured people standing in open halls repeating the same declaration together. Each video told the same surprising story. People were openly announcing their acceptance of Islam. Back in her apartment, Sarah could not stop watching the clips. Each new video carried another personal testimony. A young man from Haifa explained that he had spent months studying the translation of the Quran online. Another woman said she had discovered a sense of calm while reading about the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The stories were different, yet they all shared the same feeling of quiet certainty. Many of the people spoke about searching for something missing in their lives, something that neither success nor modern comfort had provided. They described finding a message of mercy, justice, and peace that deeply moved their hearts. Late that night, Sarah placed her phone down on the table and stared out of the window. The city lights stretched across the horizon while the distant sound of traffic continued without pause. Everything outside still looked exactly the same, yet the world suddenly felt different. At the same moment, David leaned back in his chair inside the security office. More reports were arriving from different departments describing the growing wave of online reactions. Some analysts suggested the videos were exaggerated or manipulated, while others believed they represented a real social shift happening quietly beneath the surface. David replayed the first video once more. The calm expression on the old man's face remained fixed in his mind. It did not look like propaganda or stage theater. The emotion in the crowd felt genuine, almost impossible to fabricate. Meanwhile, across several neighborhoods in Tel Aviv and Haifa, conversations had already begun to spread quietly between friends and families. Some people dismissed the videos as internet rumors, while others admitted they had also been curious about Islam for some time. As the hours passed, the clips continued spreading across digital platforms faster than anyone expected. Journalists began asking questions, commentators debated possible explanations, and millions of viewers around the world watched the same mysterious scenes with astonishment. Before dawn arrived, a simple video filmed inside one quiet hall had already traveled across continents, leaving behind a single question in the minds of countless people. What had truly happened that night? By the following morning, the quiet night in Tel Aviv had transformed into a storm of conversations spreading across the digital world. News websites began referencing the viral clips, though many of them cautiously described the event as unverified reports. Television commentators debated the authenticity of the footage, while analysts searched for explanations that could make sense of the unusual story. Inside the same government office, David arrived earlier than usual. His desk was already filled with printed reports gathered overnight from various departments. The words religious shift, online influence, and social reaction appeared repeatedly across the documents. Yet none of the reports provided a clear answer about what had truly triggered the sudden wave of conversions. He opened a secure file containing several newly collected video recordings. Each clip showed people speaking calmly about their personal journeys toward Islam. None of them appeared forced or manipulated. In fact, most of the individuals seemed hesitant to speak publicly, as if they were sharing something deeply personal rather than making a public statement. In another part of the city, Sarah walked slowly across her university campus with her phone still in her hand. Groups of students stood in small circles discussing the same topic that had dominated social media all night. Some students laughed and dismissed the story as an internet rumor, while others spoke quietly about friends who had recently shown interest in Islamic teachings. Sarah stopped near a bench beneath a tall tree and opened one of the longer videos she had saved. A young Israeli student appeared on the screen speaking softly to the camera. He explained that for years he had believed Islam was simply the enemy described in political debates. But after reading a translated version of the Quran out of curiosity, he discovered ideas about compassion, accountability, and spiritual discipline that he had never encountered before. The student in the video said something that remained in Sarah's mind long after the clip ended. He explained that faith, when discovered personally, felt very different from the opinions people inherit from society. His words were calm, almost reflective, as though he had spent months thinking before finally speaking publicly. Across the Mediterranean coast in Haifa, a small apartment filled with quiet conversation. A group of young adults had gathered in the living room, sitting close together around a low table. Some of them held printed pages containing translations of Islamic teachings, while others listened carefully as one person explained the meaning behind the declaration of faith they had seen in the videos. The atmosphere in the room was not dramatic or loud. Instead, it felt thoughtful and cautious. Many of the people there admitted they had been studying Islam privately through books and online lectures for several months. The viral videos had simply revealed that they were not alone in their search. Meanwhile, the government's internal meetings grew more intense. Senior officials discussed how the growing online attention could influence public opinion both inside the country and abroad. Some advisors suggested ignoring the story completely, believing the excitement would fade within a few days. Others were less certain. They argued that the phenomenon seemed too widespread to dismiss easily. The internet had allowed ideas to cross borders without permission, and controlling that flow of information was becoming increasingly difficult. Back in Tel Aviv, Sarah entered a small bookstore near the university library. She had visited the shop many times before, But today her attention moved toward a section she had never explored. Among the shelves she noticed a translated copy of the Quran resting beside books about world religions. For several moments she simply stared at the cover. She did not consider herself particularly religious, yet curiosity quietly pulled her closer. After glancing around the store, she picked up the book and opened to a random page. The words spoke about humanity's responsibility to live with justice, patience, and gratitude toward the Creator. The message did not sound angry or hostile as she had once assumed. Instead, the tone felt thoughtful and reflective, encouraging people to look honestly at their own hearts. Sarah closed the book slowly, surprised by the calm feeling that had settled over her thoughts. She purchased the copy without speaking much to the cashier and stepped back onto the busy street outside. At the same time, David remained in his office reviewing another report summarizing online discussions from around the world. In cities as distant as Istanbul, Jakarta, London, and Cairo, Muslim communities were sharing the same videos with excitement and curiosity. Many of the reactions celebrated the possibility that people searching for spiritual meaning had found guidance. Others warned that the situation might create tension if governments tried to suppress personal religious choices. David paused when he reached a short interview recorded with a middle-aged man who had recently embraced Islam. The man explained that his decision had nothing to do with politics or conflict. He simply wanted inner peace after years of feeling lost. The sincerity in the man's voice unsettled David more than any official report. For the first time since the videos had appeared, he wondered whether the situation was less about politics and more about something deeply personal happening quietly inside people's hearts. As evening approached again, the city of Tel Aviv continued moving through its usual routines. Shops remained open, buses moved through crowded streets, and the skyline glowed under the fading sunlight. Yet beneath the ordinary rhythm of the city, a silent transformation seemed to be unfolding, one that no official statement or news headline could fully explain. And somewhere in the growing silence between public debates and private reflections, more people were beginning to ask the same question that had started it all. What truth had those voices in the crowded hall discovered that night? In the weeks that followed, the viral excitement slowly faded from international headlines, but something quieter continued spreading beneath the surface of everyday life. The videos were no longer dominating social media, yet private conversations about faith had begun appearing in places where no one expected them. One evening in Haifa, the sea breeze moved gently through the narrow streets while a faint orange sunset rested over the harbor. Inside a modest apartment, 7 people sat together in a small circle. A single lamp illuminated the room, casting soft shadows against the walls. The group had met only recently through online discussions about religion and philosophy. Some of them were university students, others worked ordinary jobs across the city. Their backgrounds were different, but they shared the same sense of curiosity that had quietly drawn them together. On the table between them lay several books, including a Hebrew translation of the Quran and a notebook filled with handwritten questions about Islamic practices. No one spoke loudly. The atmosphere felt thoughtful, almost cautious, as if each person was still discovering their own thoughts. A young man named Michael finally broke the silence. He explained that months earlier he had begun watching lectures about Islam simply to understand what Muslims believed. At first it had been nothing more than curiosity, but gradually he felt drawn to the spiritual discipline and moral clarity described in those teachings. Another woman sitting nearby admitted she had experienced something similar. She had spent years searching through different philosophies and self-help ideas without finding lasting peace. But when she began reading about the message brought by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, she felt something inside her begin to settle. Their conversation continued quietly, moving from personal experiences to practical questions about daily prayer, charity, and spiritual responsibility. None of them claimed to have all the answers. They were simply sharing the same journey of reflection that had started with those mysterious videos. Outside the apartment window, light rain began to fall softly over the city. The distant sound of waves reaching the harbor blended with the quiet voices inside the room. Michael looked around the small circle of people and spoke with a mixture of nervousness and determination. He said they had gathered not to argue with anyone or challenge society, but simply to stand honestly with what their hearts were beginning to believe. He then slowly recited the declaration of faith, his voice trembling slightly as the words left his lips. I bear witness that there is no God but God, and I bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the messenger of God. The room fell silent for a moment. One by one, the others repeated the words softly, their voices blending together with the quiet rhythm of rain outside. Across the country in Tel Aviv, David sat in his apartment reviewing several reports he had taken home from work. Officially, the government still described the conversion stories as isolated incidents that had been exaggerated by social media. Yet the internal documents he had read suggested something different. Quiet inquiries were appearing in multiple cities. Small groups of people were asking questions about Islamic teachings, often in private settings where no cameras were present. David closed the folder and stared at the ceiling of his dimly lit room. His mind returned to the calm expression he had seen in the faces of those people in the videos. They had not looked rebellious or angry. Instead, they had appeared peaceful, almost relieved. Curiosity began pushing against the walls of his skepticism. For years he had viewed religion through the lens of politics and security analysis. Now he wondered whether he had misunderstood something deeper. The next afternoon, David walked through a quiet street in West Jerusalem where small independent bookstores lined the sidewalks. After hesitating for a moment, he stepped inside one of the shops and slowly browsed the shelves. His eyes eventually rested on a translated copy of the Quran placed between books about philosophy and world history. He picked it up carefully, glancing around to make sure no one was paying attention. When he opened the book, the message on the page spoke about humanity being guided toward justice, mercy, and humility before the Creator. The tone was calm and reflective, inviting readers to think about their purpose rather than forcing them to believe. David closed the book slowly, surprised by how different the words felt from the political arguments he had heard for years. Meanwhile, in another neighborhood of Tel Aviv, Sarah sat quietly on her balcony with the same book resting in her lap. The evening sky above the city had turned a deep shade of blue as the first stars appeared. She had spent the past several nights reading small sections at a time, pausing often to reflect on the ideas she encountered. The teachings about patience, charity, and responsibility toward others felt unexpectedly familiar, as if they were reminding her of something she had always known but never clearly understood. For the first time in many years, Sarah felt a calm sense of direction forming inside her thoughts. Across different cities, in apartments, cafes, and quiet study rooms, similar moments were unfolding. Individuals who had never met each other were beginning the same personal search for spiritual clarity. None of these changes were visible to the public eye. There were no large gatherings or dramatic announcements. Instead, the transformation moved quietly through private reflections and honest questions about life's deeper meaning. And although the world believed the story had already faded away, the quiet movement that had begun on that mysterious night was still growing, slowly, silently, and deeper than anyone could measure. Months passed, and the world gradually stopped talking about the strange night when the videos had spread across the internet. News cycles moved on to new stories, political debates filled television screens again, and daily life returned to its familiar rhythm. Yet beneath that calm surface, something quiet continued to grow. In the early morning light of Jerusalem, the narrow streets were almost empty as the sky slowly brightened over the old stone buildings. The city seemed peaceful in the soft glow of dawn, as if the night had carried away all noise and left only silence behind. Inside a modest apartment on the edge of the city, Sarah sat near the window watching the first rays of sunlight appear over the rooftops. The translated copy of the Quran rested open on the small table beside her. Over the past months she had read it carefully, page by page, never rushing, always reflecting. Each passage she encountered spoke about patience, humility, and the responsibility every human being carries toward the Creator and toward other people. The message did not feel distant or complicated. Instead, it felt personal, as though it was quietly guiding her thoughts step by step. Sarah closed the book gently and looked out across the quiet city. The search that had once filled her mind with confusion now felt clearer than ever. For the first time, she understood why so many people in those viral videos had looked relieved rather than uncertain. At the same time, far from her apartment, David stood alone on the seashore in Tel Aviv. The waves moved slowly against the sand while a cool breeze carried the scent of salt through the air. He had come there often during the past months, using the quiet sound of the ocean to think. The translated Quran he had purchased from the bookstore was now familiar in his hands. He had read many sections repeatedly, sometimes returning to the same pages just to understand them more deeply. What surprised him most was how the message focused on the human heart. It spoke about sincerity, accountability, and the idea that true peace begins within a person long before it appears in society. David looked out across the endless horizon where the sea met the sky. For years his work had trained him to analyze threats and political movements. Yet the quiet spiritual search he had witnessed in recent months did not resemble any movement he had ever studied. It was not organized by leaders, and it did not belong to any political group. Instead, it seemed to grow naturally within individuals who were simply searching for truth. Later that week, in a small house in Haifa, the same group that had gathered months earlier met again. The rain that had fallen during their first meeting had been replaced by a clear spring evening, and the open windows allowed the cool night air to move gently through the room. They sat together in the same circle, but something about the atmosphere had changed. The hesitation that once filled their conversations had been replaced by quiet confidence. Over time, they had continued studying, asking questions, and supporting each other as they learned about the responsibilities of their new faith. One of the members spoke about how their journey had not been easy. Some had faced criticism from friends or confusion from their families. Others had simply struggled with the fear of stepping into a path unfamiliar to the society around them. Yet despite those challenges, none of them felt regret. The sense of purpose they had discovered had become stronger with each passing week. Michael looked around the room and remembered the moment months earlier when he had first spoken the declaration of faith. At that time, the words had felt powerful but uncertain, like the beginning of a long road whose end he could not yet see. Now those same words felt steady and natural, like a foundation beneath his life. Outside the house, the quiet streets of Haifa carried the gentle sound of the sea in the distance. The world beyond the city continued moving through its usual struggles and disagreements, but inside that small room a different kind of change had taken root. Back in Jerusalem, Sarah stepped onto her balcony as the evening call to prayer rose softly from a small mosque somewhere beyond the hills. The sound traveled across the quiet neighborhoods, blending with the fading light of sunset. She closed her eyes for a moment and listened carefully. Only a few months earlier the call had sounded unfamiliar to her ears. Now it felt strangely comforting, as if it carried a message she had finally begun to understand. Across the coastline in Tel Aviv, David heard the same distant call carried faintly by the wind. He stood still for a long moment, reflecting on the journey that had begun with a single unexpected video. What had first appeared as a strange story spreading across social media had gradually revealed itself as something deeper, a quiet transformation happening within ordinary people. There had been no loud movement, no grand declarations that captured the world's attention. Instead, the change had unfolded silently through individual hearts searching for meaning. As the evening sky darkened over the cities of Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem, the streets returned to their familiar rhythm of lights and distant traffic. Yet in apartments, small houses, and quiet corners of those cities, people who had once been strangers to one another were now walking the same spiritual path. And though history might one day record the event simply as a curious moment in time, those who had lived through it understood something far greater. Sometimes the most powerful changes in the world begin not with noise or conflict, but with a quiet whisper inside the human heart.